Henrietta stared at the ceiling, trying to block out the activity coming from her grandson and his new wife's cabin. When she'd suggested them joining her on a trip to Italy and the Greek Isles for their wedding trip, she truly had believed she was a sound sleeper. She could not believe the energy youngsters had these days. Had she ever been so lively? It was going to be a very long voyage if they continued at this pace. 3 countries and thousands of miles, and there were no signs of slowing. Perhaps she would send them on their way by themselves after Christmas. She threw back her bedcovers, deciding a walk on deck might make her tired enough to sleep. She donned her dressing gown and a shawl to ward off the cool night air and exited the cabin, careful not to wake her maid, Hansen, who was sleeping in a hammock nearby. Hansen was a dear, but she cosseted her and fretted as if a gust of wind would carry her away. Henrietta inhaled a deep breath as she climbed the steps to the deck and heard the ship's sails whipping in the wind. She was enjoying the sea voyage, surprisingly, despite the primitive conditions, and felt a new élan she hadn't felt in years. Little excited her at her age, and she pondered how she would spend her time now that Andrew was married. She was too old to chase her growing numbers of great-grandchildren, though she would do anything for them. She shivered subconsciously. She didn't feel old enough to have great-grandchildren. She had been widowed very young, and had put raising her family, including her son Robert, the Duke of Loring, above her own needs and desires. She had felt an obligation to help with her daughter Elizabeth's children after Elizabeth had died. Now the last of them had married. Perhaps she'd continue travelling the world and stop wherever took her fancy for a time. She was considered eccentric anyway, and she was certainly too old to give any regard to others' opinions any longer. Life had become much more delightful once she'd dispensed with that inconvenient habit. She leaned over the railing, attempting to feel the waves that sliced through the water and hit the side of the ship. She relished the feel of occasional sea spray on her face, recklessly enjoying the freedom of darkness, too. "Pardon, signora. Please do not lean too much farther. I am certain it would be a pleasure to rescue you, but it would be very cold." Henrietta did not bother to look toward the rich Italian baritone voice, despite its entrancing sound that stirred her curious nature. She did smile, however. "If rescuing old ladies gives you pleasure, sir, it might be time for you to find a new hobby." She heard a deep, rumbling laugh, and then she was compelled to look. It wasn't often someone dared to laugh at her unless they were family. Her breath caught in her chest. "You have not changed at all, Etta." He took her hand and planted a kiss on it. "Bellissimo," he whispered. She squinted in the moonlight, cursing her old eyes. Standing before her was an older man with silver hair, though he stood tall and confident. Could it be? "Luca," she said with disbelief. "Si, it is I." "Has it been 30 years?" 34. She subconsciously thanked the heavens he could only see her by the light of the moon. Perhaps she wasn't too old to care completely. "What are you doing here?" "I imagine the same as you. I traveled to Italia." She nodded. "Are you also without sleep?" "Yes, I must speak to my grandson about his nocturnal habits." "Ah, you must speak of the newlyweds." He chuckled. "That is young Amore." "Indeed." She nodded and looked away. "I did not realize there were other passengers on this ship." "Si, I only came on board at Gibraltar. I have kept to myself," he responded quietly. "Because you knew I was here?" He gave a slight shrug of the shoulders. "I was not certain you would wish to see me." "Dear Luca, why would you ever think that?"